Well, welcome everybody to this baptismal Sunday. Kind of makes sense. What do they call us? We're Baptists. It's our namesake. So it makes sense. Remember, John the Baptizer, he was named for that. So, and aren't you glad that, oh boy. Okay, is that good? Okay. We got some tall people with Tyler and Brother Ricky. And aren't y'all glad Tyler got to let all his hair down this week? He got to let his down while mine is still falling out. But you know, this morning I'd like to talk to you about a little girl who used to come to this church. In fact, at the time that this church actually had its start. And I don't want to leave you in suspense. This little girl was my mom, and who passed away just this past October. A lot of you were praying for her last year. And I've been told by her and my Aunt Connie, who just sang, who's kind of like a family historian, that on the Wriborg side of my family, they had a large part in organizing this church body many years ago. Especially, I think my great-grandma Wriborg and my great-aunt Margie Wriborg, who were two of the starting charter members of this church. And Bible studies that were held at my Uncle Garland and Aunt Nina's living room kind of grew into a small church. I think I've heard it was like a barracks or something that was located here. And then around 1954, they built this church. So Mom was a member of this church for over 42 years. You know, she grew up in very humble circumstances in South Crowley, which some considered, the wrong side of the tracks back then. You know, her dad, Clyde Wriborg, was a painter by trade. Her mom, who also was named Florence, was a spell from Indian Bayou, where we live at right now. They called Mom Florence Marie to avoid confusion. And so did my dad whenever he wanted to get her attention real quick. He'd say, Florence Marie. She was also known as Flossie by many of her friends growing up, or simply as Flo. Mom was the oldest of three sisters, along with my Aunt Connie and my Aunt Christine that is sitting next to her. There were three daughters in the family. She often said that she grew up dirt poor, but didn't know it because everybody they knew was poor too. You know, Psalm 104:33 comes to mind when I think of my mom. It says, I will sing unto the Lord as long as I live. I will sing praise to my God while I have my being. For you see, singing is what my mom was best known for. You know, it's what got her noticed. You know, her claim to fame, if you will. You know, I don't know if I've ever met anyone who knew her that did not mention her singing. It was very much her identity. And in the 80s, she recorded a tape that was simply titled Florence Martin Sings. Kind of like John the Baptist. He baptized. Florence Martin Sings. And I'm told she gave her first public performance at the tender age of 3 or 4. Not quite sure on that. And she would compete in talent shows later on at school and elsewhere. You know, she even made it on TV when she was 15 years old in a couple of talent shows. Isn't that amazing? They had TV back then. Who knew? So she competed in one in Lafayette and one in Lake Charles. She won the first round in Lafayette. This was like, what do they call the shows now? America's Got Talent? This is what their version. Something like that, yeah. So she actually won in the first round singing a gospel song called I Believe, which I think was made famous, recorded originally by Frankie Lane. I don't know if anybody remembers that name. But it was covered also by Elvis Presley. Now, I know everybody remembers that name. But so she went to the second round, and she sang a somewhat, I would say, a more secular song called Love Me by Elvis Presley. And she lost. So that kind of set the stage where you would see her singing would be used most. But the world, as it always does, took notice of Mom's talent, as she received at least one offer to sing for a band. How many people know that the devil is a talent scout? He's always on the search for talent. But my Pawpaw Clyde, her dad, he wouldn't have any of that. So to Mom's disappointment, she was stuck singing in church in school. Recently I had the opportunity to do something special. I read my mom's diary that she kept when she was a 15, 16-year-old. The year was 1957. I kind of figured if she had kept it all these years, there was a God-given reason that she did. And it was truly a captivating time capsule of 1957 Crowley, as seen through the eyes of a teenage girl who attended Crowley High School. She was very active. And when I say very, I mean extremely active. That girl did more by the time 15 than I have done already. She made her own money babysitting for the Fremo and Huffpaw families. Money she used to buy her own clothes. She had charge accounts uptown. She would buy a 7-Up or burger at the Cozy Corner, which is now the Firehouse Cafe, if you know that. But she would spend her times on her front porch after school, talking to friends who would pass by on foot, bicycle, or car. She also spent a lot of time walking the downtown area and getting rides with friends when apparently Crowley's streets were safe all hours of the day and night. It was a different time. You wouldn't dream of that now. She would go help pay bills or mail letters for her mom, take her 2 little sisters swimming and shopping. But and Aunt Margie was a worked for the phone company, and she was a mentor of my mom. So life heavily revolved around this church for them, where she would teach Sunday school as a teenager, 16, and she would often sing. One time I saw that she had to fill in to lead the congregation. I thought that was pretty good for 16 years old. And I read on one page, on June 27, 1957, she wrote, "We had to get up at 5 a.m. this morning. The hurricane is coming." This was Hurricane Audrey. And they took shelter in this church right here with a lot of other families, her sisters and her family. So this church was a source of protection for Mama in more than one way. But Mom seemed very adult for her age, reading her diary. Certainly the beginnings of the strong, outspoken woman that I knew and loved as Mom. But some things about her were very different, as you might expect. So it was very surreal getting acquainted with this 15, 16-year-old version of my mom. It felt like that movie Back to the Future. Y'all remember that? Marty McFly goes back in time in the DeLorean, and he meets his mom, his teenage mom, before she was his mom. Here I was meeting my teenage mom through the time portal of her diary. So of course, she did not have the wisdom of the mom I knew. Despite being saved by that time, in many aspects, she was just a normal teenage girl. which is to say she was crazy. Apologies to any teenagers around. But, we all remember being 16. We definitely needed some guidance and protection from the world to ensure that we would turn out well later. Even with all of her activities, Mom was convinced, get this, that life was passing her by. Her mom and dad wouldn't let her do anything or go anywhere. And this is after I've read all the places she's gone. She couldn't even date, and they had no phone. Teenagers would die today. And this beautiful brunette who had been on television twice and was somewhat a local celebrity thought that she was too tall and skinny to be attractive. She had no luck at all. Nothing was going right in her life, and she would often lament, well, I guess that's how it goes for me. I'm just Flossie. She had hoped that her singing talent would bring her fame and fortune, but now her dad was saying no. What a meanie. Think how different the mindset of today is when we tell our children, pursue your dreams, follow your heart. Pawpaw, he wasn't much into that. In fact, Mama would write later in the song she wrote for him, Daddy's song, that his advice was, honey, sing for Jesus, for with him, child, you can't go wrong. He took the choice right out of my mom's hands. But it was to protect her from the world and its dangers that she could not see in her innocence. And along with her mom, Aunt Margie, and others, including this church body, protection was provided for my mom as she matured. And so the diary ends on December 31st, 1957, leaving me wanting more, but was definitely enough for me to see how God was working in my young mother's life. And through hers, even how he was working in my life before I had ever been born. I could not help thinking in that movie that like in the movie, that my very existence hung in the balances as Mom would choose either to follow the way of the world or follow the way of God. And if the world's way, surely I would not be here today. It's interesting how much we believe that we are the end-all, be-all when it comes to our own lives. But in reality, we can do nothing without Him. So praise God for His providence in our lives. Providence before we were ever even born. But outside the diary, I'd also heard growing up that Mom wanted to marry Elvis Presley. Not many girls had that wish, I'm sure, back then. Just millions, zillions. But that was kind of one of those cases of James 4:3. You ask and receive not because you ask amiss. As God chose for her this 6'3" tall iota country boy. Dad tells the story that his dad gave him some roosters and some chickens and instructed him to go into the big city and find a wife. Now, I'm not sure if that's true or not. Dad has been known to pull my leg on occasion. But nevertheless, these two 18-year-olds soon entered into a marriage that would span 62 blessed years. And, not to make light of Mom's disease, but I remember last year around this time being in the hospital ER with her. And her illness would cause sometimes hallucinations. She told me, we have to do something about your dad. He is running very fast all over the fields at night. I said, Mom, Dad is 80 years old. I don't think he is running fast anywhere. She looked at me in the face and she said, Barry, you don't know what your dad can do. He's from the country. At which point I said, well, yeah, I can see that. So forever sealed in the mind of this city girl, despite the ravages of dementia, was this country boy God had given her who could do anything. Truly her earthly Superman. You know, Ephesians 3:20 comes to mind. Now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundant above all we ask or think. You know, Mom had got someone much better than Elvis Presley, don't you think? You know, so they both became members of Parkinson Avenue Baptist Church in Crowley and remained here till 1983. You know, Mom learned to play the guitar and she would sing Southern gospel music as a soloist or with groups in the church. Darius LeBlanc, which many of you might remember from this church, was Mom's favorite collaborator in music. He would play the guitar or steel guitar, and they would sing songs like Daddy sang bass, Mama sang tenor. You know, these songs are forever etched in my mind. So Mom's gospel singing was always in high demand. She would sing at weddings, funerals, and in churches of every denomination. You know, it didn't matter to her. She had the same style no matter what church she sang out. Catholic, it didn't matter. You got the same version of Mom. Everybody did. Later, she would often be a featured soloist at Northside Assembly of God, where she attended later. She would sing many of the popular songs like Watch the Lamb, When He Was on the Cross, which my Aunt Connie just sang, and Ain't No Grave Gonna Hold My Body Down, and One Day at a Time was some of the people's favorites. You know, so by the 80s, Mom's talent once again was getting noticed by the world, and she had made a tape of her songs that I talked about, Florence, which I have copies if anybody would like one, free of charge, of course. So there was talk of her taking her singing on the road. You know, maybe go to Nashville. But you know, Mom was not interested in making a career out of singing and the compromises that would inevitably come with that. And this time, she did not need her dad, my pawpaw, to stop her. Because this was not Flossie anymore, but a more fully matured Florence Marie. She just loved being a wife and mother and just singing in church. And you know, mother was the way that I knew this woman best because she was my mom. You know, she was very protective of her kids, just like her mom and dad were with her. You didn't mess with Florence Martin's children. You know, and for the most of the time, she was a stay-at-home mom, in which always kind of made us feel like us kids were the priority in her life. You know, she was the mom in the school pickup line that would be waiting as you came out of school. She was the mom that did the lion's share of the school projects, which I appreciated. But most importantly, she was the one that me and my little brother Danny went to tell her that we believed in Jesus and that we wanted to be baptized. And one Sunday night, we were baptized here by Brother Brooks. You know, nothing gave her more joy than for her children to receive Christ. That's what she was all about. You know, she also taught me to play the guitar and sing. How about that? You know, I can still see in my mind's eye her standing behind me about right here as I played guitar and sang on a Sunday night. I think I sang I Saw the Light. And My career was short-lived. I remember telling Darius, I took your song, Darius, because Darius would sing that song. He said, oh boy, that's a feather in my cap. But one of the things I admired most about my mom was that she had the courage of her convictions and a boldness in her beliefs that I have not seen in many people. You never had to wonder what Florence Martin believed. If you knew her for any time at all, you knew her beliefs because they were such an outward part of who she was. She loved Jesus, the Word of God, and it shaped how she saw the world. She did not compromise those beliefs to ingratiate herself with anyone, no matter who they were. She did not equate meekness with weakness, or turning the other cheek with an act of backing down, but one of standing up. And stand up she did with a strength grounded in godly humility, but always defiant in the face of evil. Mom was not a fan of drinking alcohol, if anyone knew her. So it was one year she organized a petition to limit the sale of alcohol during the Rice Festival. And recently I was going through her papers and I found all these signatures that she had collected, copies of them. And just going through it, I was amazed. It was literally a who's who of Crowley that had signed this petition. Along with friends, family, and church people. But I thought it was just a testament to Mom's persuasive power and her sheer force of personality. Scanning the names, some of them were familiar. And I kind of doubt some of these people really supported the cause. But it was just out of respect for who my mom was that they signed it. It's quite likely that quite a few heavy drinkers signed her petition. That's the kind of person she was. She had that effect on people. But Mom's convictions and outspokenness did not come without opposition at times. And sometimes from a very unlikely source. From within the church itself. In the 80s, she became president of Acadia Parish Right to Life. And defending the unborn became another passion of hers. She would counsel young women who were considering abortion to convince them to have their babies. She believed Christians should be the salt of the earth and therefore obligated to promote moral government that respected the laws of God. So when pro-life events were happening in the area, she would go around to the local churches and ask the pastors to get out the word. And some would, some didn't, but at least everybody was usually kind about, hey, thanks for letting me know, Sister Florence. Except for one pastor that she told me about, who flatly refused, telling her, I don't get involved in that sort of thing. And he went on to explain some of the legalities of why he felt that he was prevented from engaging in such activity. So my mom told us that she told him, well, you know what? You sound more like a lawyer than a pastor. And Dad is my witness. He is a lawyer today and not a pastor. So she called it. Also I remember Mom singing in a little church somewhere in Acadia Parish, and we were there, and she was speaking concerning the unborn before her song, as she would often do. Suddenly the niece of the pastor stood up and interrupted and said really loud, don't bring your politics into this church. Everyone was stunned, and the pastor was visibly embarrassed. Mom calmly responded something to the effect, she did not believe abortion was an issue that could be dismissed as politics, but a moral one that the church was obligated to speak out on. Then she just sang her song like nothing had happened. She was very strong. She didn't let stuff bother her. So you see, this taught me at a young age that sometimes speaking out on moral issues will get you called political or other names by church people. Other names worse. But my mom didn't care. She was willing to stand for the truth no matter what the response was. She didn't come by her beliefs based on what was popular. Abortion to her was murder, the taking of an innocent life, a breaking of the sixth commandment, thou shalt not kill. She loved her country and she was heartbroken because she did not see how God could bless this country as long as it was aborting its children. So she served as president during the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. She would even get Mayor Robert East, if any of y'all remember him, he was mayor, to declare a pro-life week every year in the month of February. So she was very successful in bringing attention to the pro-life cause. And I was also going through her papers recently on that, and I saw the Charter of Organization for Acadia Parish Right to Life in 1977. And lo and behold, whose name do you think I saw as the first vice president of Acadia Parish Right to Life in 1977? A man that went by Reverend Shadrach R. Brooks, the longtime pastor who baptized us all, my whole family. He was the first vice president of Acadia Parish Right to Life. So this church has a history of standing up for life. And I'm very grateful that I'm grateful that we have a pastor right here, Tyler, I know he has a heart for the unborn, as he does for all children, because I've talked to him about it. And we really owe a lot of these pioneers of the Right to Life movement who labored in the 70s and 80s along with my mom, because we're finally starting to see some fruit of all that labor. Several states have passed restrictions. And some of the courts are not overturning them anymore. They had this crazy guy that got elected in 2016, and he put some judges in there that aren't knocking down these pro-life laws. Interesting to consider, Even right here in Louisiana, there's legislation moving that would grant legal rights, all legal rights, to the unborn. So if my mom was here today, what would she say? Call your legislator. Tell them how you feel about that. Less known is that my mom, she actually wrote songs too, and she had 6 original songs, which are on the CD that I have. One was The Power of Prayer, Praise His Name, Lay Your Burdens on Him, Hey Satan. Now this was a song that got her in trouble with another particular pastor. He would not, she had been scheduled to sing, and when he found out the name of the song, he wouldn't let her sing it, because the name of the song was Hey Satan. I guess he did not want Mama conjuring up the Lord of the Flies in his church. But we remember what Jesus said to Peter, "Get thee behind me, Satan, for you are offense to me." And that's all my mom was trying to say in this song. Get thee behind me, because Satan, you can't win. And finally there was Daddy's song. Daddy's song was the one she wrote after her dad died, and she was extremely close to her daddy, even though she thought he was a meanie at times. But Daddy's song, it tells the story of her dad teaching her to sing his favorite gospel hymns. When the roll is called up yonder, The Old Rugged Cross, Amazing Grace, and others. These were her daddy's songs, and she would sing them for the rest of her life. And some of you are probably aware, this past year was especially difficult for all of us in our family, my sister, my dad, brother. As caring for Mom at home became more and more difficult. Daddy bore the brunt of it. Sometimes I thought to myself, why does Mom have to go through this? She was an outspoken Christian all of her life. She had contended for the faith. And she used her singing gift in the end to glorify God alone. And now all she really wanted to do, because she would tell us, it was to go home to be with Jesus. And I think it's very natural for all of us to, kind of prefer, when that time comes, prefer like a swift and painless death. Certainly over a slow, lingering death. The old cowboys used to have a saying, they wanted to die with their boots on. Which means they wanted to die in their strength, just to be taken and not have to go down slowly. But instead Mom was going through this almost Job-like experience where each ability, one by one, was being taken from her over a period of several months. Even worse, she would relive traumatic life experiences like the death of her dad or the passing of my older brother, Bubba. And she had been a very strong person all of her life, and being dependent on everyone was a nightmare to her. It drove her even more, crazy. Except for Daddy. She didn't mind depending on Daddy for some reason. I guess it was that one flesh thing, A common refrain during this time was, where's Wendell? She didn't want him too far. Some days, we didn't even know what to do. But God taught me through this, as a greater grace was needed, a greater grace was given. And we grew ourselves through this process of taking care with Mom. And it paid dividends that I can't begin to express to you today. But I did get to listen to her last public singing performance that she ever gave. And it was at Acadia General Hospital for her nurses. She sang to them, "Ain't no grave gonna hold my body down." We didn't even think that she was even close to capable of singing when she did it one night, and we got her to do it for us one morning. She had sang it for Melanie and Rachel, who was staying at the hospital with her at night. But you see, my mom, she believed in resurrection, And after this last hospital stay, heading into her 80th birthday, it seemed like her anxiety and her delusions begin to ease up. Even amidst all this suffering, I begin to see God's purpose even in this. Mama never feared death. But like all of us, she feared prolonged suffering and being a burden to her loved ones. But even now, I sense that He was even removing this fear from her. Almost a deeper level of sanctification that would not be possible in brighter circumstances. I've heard it said before, and you probably too, that we're never closer to Christ than when we share in His suffering. Kind of like a paraphrase of that 1 Peter 4:13. So Mom was getting very close indeed. And we read in Scripture the suffering of the disciples and so many believers in Scripture and what they went through. And the greatest of these people, they seemed to suffer the most, didn't they? So, why would I think it's strange what was happening to my mom, who I considered a great believer? So Mom, she was dying in her weakness. But what did Paul write? For when I am weak, I am then strong. Towards the end, I had become Mom's physical therapist of last resort, guiding her through small exercises every day after work. And after we would finish, I would usually read to her from one of her many devotions that she had stacked all over the house, along with from the Bible itself. I never felt closer to my mom than I did at these times. And I knew I was thankful that she was fully aware of what was going on and what I was reading. With her last physical ability, she would find some way to respond. Either with a whisper, a head nod, squeeze of the hand, or that raised eyebrow. The Saturday night before she died, Rachel and I were singing hymns to her. And after we finished, I asked Mom, I said, hey, how do you like that, Mom? Do you think we ought to take this act on the road? There was no response, so I said, I guess she didn't like it very much. But a few seconds passed, and here come the right eyebrow up. Like I'd seen it countless times before, whenever Dad would crack some joke or make some jest. So I knew she understood fully. So we said our goodbyes, and she squeezed our hands. We didn't know that this was the last time we would see her alive on this side. We had made plans for the next day to be over there after church. And amazingly, we were right here in this sanctuary, I think sitting where Rachel is right now, when she passed away at home. I told the Sunday school class that, it was likely the time of her going home was getting close, not knowing that it was right at hand. And God had appointed this time all along, I believe. A Sunday morning of all times when her grandson Trent would be preaching in the church she grew up in and served in. Mom would breathe her last breath while Trent was speaking of Jesus' last on the cross. So it was finished. And just one more final detail that God did not overlook. She took her last breath literally in the hands of my dad, in like a handoff from her earthly Superman, her Wendell, to her heavenly Superman, her Jesus. The three of them alone in that instant, marking the end of a 62-year triune relationship. And until resurrection morning, all that we have left is to remember the song that was her life. But what a song it was, written and orchestrated by the almighty maestro himself. Though there may have been seasons that seemed out of tune, where the chorus was a bit off key, or the beat out of time, Father God always was there to assure the overall harmony and work all things for her good. And a rescued melody never sounded so sweet. And why not? Were we with her all this time and did not recognize the spirit that was living in her? Did not our heart burn within us as she sang her song? Yes, for she was her father's song all alone, and she was beautiful music to our ears. Well, I appreciate y'all being patient with me delivering that. I know the last time that I got up here, I was doing something similar for my brother who passed. And I really hate to leave the impression that somebody has to die for me to get up here. But in a larger sense, that's exactly the case, right? But we believe in resurrection. Jesus died and he was raised. And these people that we've lost in the past year, Brother Lopez, Brother Wilbur's wife, we're going to see them again on resurrection morning. That's what baptism is all about. It's a repenter's baptism, but it's also a representation of death and resurrection, the new man coming up. So at this time, I would like to turn it back over to Brother Tyler to finish out the service.